We'll get you started talking about the global aspect of the movie, the global issues, and then we'll get to more local issues.
Main character Alina, she just got a baby a week ago, a young boy, so she's happy. But also there are now bike lanes on the main avenue through Sao Paulo. Paulista, which was like impossible, suddenly just happened, and it's now thousands of bicyclists every day on that street. So the bike revolution kind of moves on. And you can see that in many South American cities and in North American cities, also because you can also see it in LA and in New York.
You had footage of Ciclovia there, wasn't it? During
It was, yes, but they all had clothes on, so it was a bit boring. Bad joke, sorry. So what do you think, Ed?
This is the second time I've seen it. I picked up on a lot more the second time around. It's a terrific film. It's an important film. The movement is very important to find ways for people to get out of their cars, because ultimately there's going to be more and more gridlock. And there was a study done years ago about the efficiency of ground transportation modes. And there's no more energy efficient mode of ground transportation in the world than a bicycle. You could certainly say it would be true a sailboat is more energy efficient because you could just use wind to go around the whole globe. But you can't make enough ethanol for a vehicle to go 30 miles on one pure corner, one bowl ride. It's not enough. There's not enough to do it. It's very energy efficient. Yeah. And Dave knows about this.
But you get the space conflict, because the space conflict is the most interesting thing in cities. You talked about the whole island will be on gridlock soon.
Right.
When the tourists are coming. But the space is interesting, and now cities all over the world will grow a lot in the coming 30 years. So I mean, if we just keep the same amount of cars per family, it won't work at all. I mean, it's not working at all in LA. It doesn't really work.
Correct.
Yeah, and to build more roads, or here on the island, a roundabout or bypass, it's to cure traffic, gridlock. It's like buying a bigger pair of pants and calling it a cure for obesity. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. The more we build facilities for more vehicles, for more motor vehicles, the more motor vehicles we are going to get.
Yeah, that's what we know,
yeah.
And everybody knows that. But so this film is focused a little bit also about the lobby forces, because I think if you want to change something, it's kind of important to know who we are up against, and the people who have interest in this, the motor companies, the oil companies, maybe also the construction companies, they invest a lot of money to not change the world, because they are scared for the change. We need to kind of see through their talking points, and because the car industry is now talking a lot about electric cars, maybe about self-driving cars, and they say it will be much better. Of course, the electric car is much better, but in the space conflict, a Tesla will not make any difference at all in Los Angeles.
I'm widely known for my electric car, and I got nothing against my Nissan Leaf. It's a fine car, and I charge it on solar, so it becomes very, very green.
That's cool.
But that's the fourth choice in my transportation hierarchy. Number one, I quite deliberately moved to an area, Studio City, where you can walk anywhere at like Vineyard Haven. Number one transportation choice is walking. Number two is my bicycle. Number three is public transportation, and a distant fourth is my electric car. I only take that when I must, and it's a good way to get around, and as we all know, it's quite economical. Yeah. How much have you saved, Dave? Insurance and everything.
Insurance and everything, I would call it it's been 5 years since I've owned a car, and I would call it like winning the lottery. You really do. I'd have to get a job if I had a car. It's a number of years back, maybe 15 years ago, there was a gentleman at the Whaling Church promoting his book. I believe it was called The End of Oil. And I was sitting there raising my hand. I said, if all the cars we have jammed up on the island were suddenly to turn into electric vehicles, we'd still have gridlock. And his response was, not everybody wants to ride a bicycle or take the bus.
I can tell you that the footage from Copenhagen, I mean, I had a special take on Copenhagen because film has to be entertaining, so why interview a mayor that would be really proud and probably boring? So the taxi driver was like a funny take.
Great choice, I think.
Yeah, so because it's telling the same story about a city where the rules are different. But it's filmed in March, so you can see there were ice on the lake, you know. And all that bikes were out in the middle of the winter. It says something. So if you go to Copenhagen now, these weeks, it will be many more bikes. The climate is the same as you have here on the island.
Now we have some questions. Can we start to take questions?
Absolutely, we should.
Right there, sir, in the blue.
So I'm a year-round cyclist on Martha's Vineyard, and this place feels more hostile to bicyclists than the city. The question is, how do we lower the hostility of the vehicle drivers? And the second thing, which is really part of it, is there's no enforcement of people driving unsafely relative to cyclists. And I was passed by an 18-wheeler near the Scottish Bakehouse last year, where I could feel his, you know, he was near me by inches. And I followed him to the ferry because I knew where he was going. And I talked to 2 Vineyard Haven policemen about it. And the first one said, "You should walk your bike." And I said, "It's a long way from West Tisbury." And the second one, the woman who directs the traffic said, "Some people just don't follow the rules." That's my response from law enforcement on the island. So that, to me, those are the 2 problems, and I'm curious how other locales have solved those problems.
What makes a big difference, and that is happening now in many places, is separate bike lanes and safe. The theory of the girl in the film here is we need to be many out there. If we are present on the streets, they get used to us, and we also become kind of we put pressure on everybody.
So let's all take our clothes off and go riding. To get their attention, I think that will work.
And
I'd be hidden.
That's true. It wouldn't make any difference with you, Dave. There's a pod down there.
Ja, hi there. Hej, jag är från Sverige också.
Hey.
Min bror bor i Malmö. But anyway, I wanted to say, Ed, I think it was you, that I can quote you from the Who Killed the Electric Car. I think you said, an electric car is not for everybody. No, it's not for everybody. Only about 90% of the people.
That is correct. Electric cars could only satisfy 96% of our transportation needs. It doesn't cut down the pollution. It only cuts down on 94% of the pollution. The bicycles could work for, you know, everybody who's in some sort of physical shape to ride a bike, which is a lot of us. You know, when weather and fitness permit, and apparently in Copenhagen, that's year-round, it's for everybody, and the cut down on pollution is extreme, and the cut down on traffic is something we have to remember. That's extraordinary. Yes.
So what I wanted to say with that one is that I have a Leaf also. I've had it for 4 winters, and these have been some humdinger winters here. It's an absolutely 100% reliable car, and yet I think there are only 6 of them on the island. We don't have to talk about electric cars using gasoline. That's like old-fashioned, outmoded stuff. If people realized how amazing electric cars are, they would switch, but they're not learning how wonderful they are.
They're much better, but I think we have to rethink the whole. So as the professor in Brazil said, also the electric car is it's more confirming the paradigm instead of going against it. And I think it's time to shift focus totally. We need to build cities in a new way. In a place like this island, more people could go on bike, and then it's easier to commute also in winter time.
Yeah, the Pedigo is a nice electric bike. They have that's a good way to go if you are not fit enough to handle the wind and the hills, what have you. That's another way to get around and use very little wattage and very little space.
But my bottom line here, conflict within city planning. And this city planning, I would claim, is now a lobby-driven city planning we have. And that lobby has kind of taken over in many countries, not only in the US, even if you're first. But you can see they copied it in Brazil, and in Sweden it's the same. They're taking over the cities in many ways. Some people need a car, and they should have the right to have a car, of course. But maybe then you have to take down the speed limits. Researchers know if you take down the speed a lot, you will still get to point A to B in the same time. Emotionally feel the need or urge to push the button, you know, and that's kind of crazy.
Plus, nowadays, they're selling cars with 700 horsepower. You know, you can get these monster machines right from the dealer.
Where do you use it?
Where do you use it? That's right. Mercedes, I think they sell, just about all their cars are 500 horsepower. They're monster machines, and and especially here on Martha's Vineyard. Do these cars ever get warmed up? Are
It's
they ever
also-
running at the most efficient
But
rate?
you also remember they're selling these machines at the same time the whole world talks about climate change or should talk about climate change.
Yes.
To drive these amazingly big cars are totally against what we should be doing. So it's sad. Many
Yeah. Cicely.
I just want to talk on the other part of it, that walking or biking, it's so sane, it's so helpful, not just physically. I mean, you get back more if you do this. And I always found the car stressful. I could go too many places, I could do too many things. I had to sit in traffic like they talk, but then I had to find a place to park. In fact, the fellow that sat next to me was saying, I couldn't find a place to park when he got here. So, I find that let go of the car at least a day, a
Absolutely.
week.
Bicyclists have more fun, they have better bodies, they have
Yes.
probably also better sex. I mean, they meet more people, so it's
That's right.
yeah. I mean, it's
And I mean, I'll even use the bus, and the bus is, now I can communicate with people, I know them, it's like happy hour after work, we're all on the same bus together. And, it's so isolating, and I could go on, but I think people should give it a try, just to give up the car and see how peace and,
it's a little bit about.
good their life could be.
I mean, we talk about climate because we now live we have some global crises. And one is the climate, one is the overspending of the global resources. We have this global overshoot day, which is now, I think it's in August every year, where we have spent the resources for 1 year. And that day kind of tends to move 1 day earlier every year. It's very scary. So we have that. We have these two global crises, and then add cities that kind of are not functioning because of all the traffic. So by using your bike once a week, twice a week, you will create your own climate effect. You will make your own impact on the planet by just parking your car for 1 day. So and I think that's kind of inspiring because you can see in this film there's also parts that are kind of bad news for all of us, and that's the sad thing of doing environmental films, that it's so many bad news out there. So I was happy to add the good news, and that's the bicycle. So so that's kind of it's worth thinking about, I would say. Sorry, many questions after. Yes.
I have some more bad news. Worldwide, there's 1.3 million auto-related deaths every year. 49% of those are pedestrians, bicyclists, and motorcyclists. And if they've studied the number of cars per capita between 2010 and between 2000 and 2010, and while the United States has a growth of per capita cars of about 4 or 5%, in much of the developing world, particularly in Asia, the growth of cars per capita has gone up by 1,000 or 2,000%. So we really have to do something. Plus, the number of death and disability per year due to autos is higher than malaria, AIDS, and TB combined.
And you can add some terrorists too. It doesn't really matter.
We got a lot to do.
Could somebody from the panel or the audience try to address affecting the policies of the steamship authority, which seems to want to bring more and more cars here. And as we speak, a new boat is arriving with more capacity, et cetera,
He's talking about changing the steamship authority, getting them to function. You know, it's like Richard Toole was saying about we're going to have gridlock because more vehicles are going to be getting off the boat and not have a place to go. It is.
But how do we address, where do we start to ask them to bring less here?
Steamship, the Joint Transportation Committee, you know, the Martha's Vineyard Commission, you know,
I'd be
come.
interested to hear from the man from the Conservation Society. Perhaps he had an insight.
Well, I mean, I agree. I think Martha's Vineyard Commission is the place to start. Bill Vino is in the audience.
Yes, he's right here somewhere. There he is.
The Steamship Authority is an interesting animal. You know, way back when, they were under the jurisdiction of the Martha's Vineyard Commission, but when they proposed, or maybe shortly before that, when they proposed the second slip in Vineyard Haven, they got themselves withdrawn from the jurisdiction of the Martha's Vineyard Commission. So the Martha's Vineyard Commission can't really tell them what to do. But I think if we all rose up and said, enough is enough. I mentioned it to our representative, Mark, and he told me, looked at me in the eye with an anger in his voice, and he said to me, when you stop building houses, we'll stop building boats.
I have a suggestion for the community, because I understand the steamship, they want to make money, and the island want to bring in a lot of tourists. You should study bike tourism projects around. In Europe there are many different bike tourism projects, there are some in France where you can go from vineyard to vineyard, from village to village, the same in Italy, also in Sweden. They have funding from the European Union, so they're kind of a really cool developed project. But the cool thing is from small, because this is almost like a little French county, this island. And the cool thing is when people arrive on bikes to the villages, there are much more, you can actually get more tourists into town than you can today because of the cars and the parking spaces. And sell that to the community here. It's a great idea. Up here.
I'm wondering about the more predominant use of paint on the highways. We all know that space is very tight. But if we had predominant bike lanes, the bike lane is always there. It might change our attitude about being more aware of that, and it might make it safer. I'm wondering if we could ever do that just by using paint.
There are many levels of doing it. Paint is one level. And the next is of course having it totally separated, which is the safest one. So it's all about. I think for me, I mean, I live in a city called Malmö, which is just opposite Copenhagen, so it's on the Swedish side. And my kids are now grown up, but they always bike to school, quite a long distance. But I could always find a way where they could go without being with cars. And then. It meant that they built bicycle tunnels under the big roads. So I mean, everything is doable. Well, if you really want children out there, if you want old people, if you want women out there, so driving cars, bikes shouldn't only be for the most avid bikers. I think that's the most important thing.
What the bike paths here on the island, they're used as passing lanes by automobiles, they're used by businesses, contractors for parking. The buses pull up onto the bike paths to let off their people, you know, and I say to them at the JTC, Joint Transportation Committee, what do you do when you don't have a bike path to park on, when you're letting people off the buses? They say, we stop in the lane. That's where they should be stopping.
Some people get provoked by the title of this film because they think it's a war between bicyclists and motorists. It's not. And we've had cities for thousands of years on this planet. In all of these years, the street was public space for everyone. And suddenly, 60, 70 years ago, most people lost that public space and took over by one machine. And I think we have to turn the cities back into something that the streets are for everyone.